to Databricks Week with Sigma. This week we've been highlighting the integration between Databricks and Sigma and how we can help democratize data and AI for all together. My name is Mitch Ertle, and I'm a Senior Partner Solutions Architect here with Sigma. During this session, we will be covering how you can use Databricks LLMs and Gen AI within Sigma. If you heard my session earlier this week, I talked through how Sigma is a lightweight BI and analytics tool that sits directly on top of Databricks. I won't spend too long getting back into this, but for folks that might not have been able to previously make that session, Sigma is a lightweight BI and analytics tool that sits directly on top of Databricks. We leverage Databricks' SQL warehouses for our compute engine and use Databricks' Delta tables to visualize and surface data within our platform. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can extend what Databricks is doing with Gen AI into Sigma. To do this, we're going to talk about 3 different functionalities that Sigma is currently leveraging and how you can bring these into your production workloads. The first is AI Query. AI Query is a function that Databricks has created that allows you to call foundational models from Databricks and bring those into Sigma to add additional context to your data or anything that you would want to use with an LLM. AI functions are predefined functions created by Databricks to help extend Gen AI into specific areas like sentiment analysis, forecasting, extraction, language translation, and many others. And then finally, we're going to talk through our write-back functionality and how Sigma can help provide additional context and data back into Databricks. This can be used for a multitude of things. We're seeing our customers use this for things like RAG and fine-tuning. We're also seeing input tables and write-back functionality used to help determine if LLMs are creating the right recommendations and outputs based on the inputs that are coming in. Now that we've talked through what Sigma is and where we sit in the modern data stack, along with how Sigma is leveraging Databricks' Gen AI functionality and LLMs, let's go ahead and jump into our session. Now that we've talked through Databricks' Gen AI and LLMs, let's show in a real-life demo how we can leverage these within Sigma. Before we jump into this, just a couple pieces of context. The first being, what we're going to be doing today is actually leveraging Databricks' foundational models. These models are available for anyone and everyone on the Databricks platform. As you can see, there's a list of quite a few different models. Today, we're going to be focusing on DBRX and also mixed real. Before we get into Sigma, we're actually going to jump into a Databricks notebook to highlight how these AI queries and AI functions can be leveraged and used within Databricks to create functions that then can be surfaced within Sigma. This allows you to do the dev work within Databricks for your developers and data folks who might have a better idea of how to write SQL or Python in order to help build these functions. We're also going to be highlighting how this can be done within Sigma for non-technical folks. So jumping into our Databricks notebook, from here, what you'll see is we have a notebook with some markdown language that's going to tell us what we're going to be doing in our Databricks environment to help surface a AI query function within Sigma. So the first thing we're going to be doing within this notebook is actually testing our AI query prompt. This is to make sure that the query prompt is valid and returns the data as expected. Or next, we'll be wrapping the AI query prompt in a function so that we can call this within Sigma. The last piece of this is actually testing our wrap function just to make sure everything's working. On our first cell here, we have AI query. What I've done is just left this here so that we can build this. So first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and hit return, just space this out a little bit. And then what Databricks is going to do as we're coming into this function is actually start to fill this in. So if I type, let me just grab from down below. Wow, see, what it's doing is actually looking at context of the query and being able to say, oh, I see this in other cells within the notebook. I think this is what you're looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit tab. This means that we're going to be using Databricks' DBRX LLM. And then from there, what we're actually going to be doing is instructing it and giving it a prompt to help generate a sample data set. I'm going to go copy this over from my notebook on the side here. So let me go ahead and put this in. And like I said before, I grabbed a little too much of the query. Like I said before, this is a prompt for our DBRX LLM to create a sample data set. What we're going to be doing is creating some fake sales data, and we have some different sales fields in here that we want it to automatically generate for us. And then underneath here, we've specified that the output of the sales data should be Apple products. So we should be seeing things like AirPods, any of those kinds of things. And then we've also specified we want the product ID to correspond to the product name. And then the last part of this that's actually really important is being able to specify how we want the data returned to us. So typically when you query an LLM, it's going to return data in a myriad of ways, but normally it comes with a summary. And then if you actually ask for data, that data will show up in a table. For this use case, we only want it to return the JSON data, so we're being very specific about how we actually get it to return that. Give me JSON only, no text outside of JSON, so on and so forth. We've even added some text here to help remove outputs that tend to show up on this. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and execute this. This is going to run against our SQL serverless warehouse. And you can see it's already returned. And then if we look, it's actually done a pretty good job of this. And even though we've instructed it in our prompt to remove these types of fields, there's still some fields in here that are going to be difficult for us to handle or get in the way of us being able to actually build an AI function that can be passed into Sigma. So we need to remove this JSON text. If we go down here, you can see I've added these replace functions, and we're actually pulling out that JSON text that's showing up in the output. And then additionally, what we're doing is being able to store this as a JSON. So when we run this again, we should be able to see this as JSON, and we should actually see the different arrays for each customer, for each row for the customer data. Great. So we can see this returned how we'd wanted it to. Databricks has picked this up as an array. So this is an array data type now. From here, there's one more step that needs to be done in order to actually expose this data so that it can be used within Sigma. The last piece that we need to do is actually build this into a function so that we can call this within Sigma. This allows your non-technical users to be able to generate these kinds of things. You can see in our create function here, I haven't necessarily passed in any variable, but if we wanted to, we could add in a variable that says create X number of rows of data and then pass that into our prompt down here. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and run this. This is going to run. This tells us that this is okay. This is the same query that we had above, only wrapped in a function, and we're specifying the function name and then how we want the data returned. Really quickly, before we leave here, we're just going to go ahead and test our function. So we're calling the function here. And then what we're doing is actually, because it's an array, we're going to use explode to expand and unnest this. Now this is complete. We see that we have our relational data here, and we should be able to leverage this same function within Sigma. Getting back into Sigma here, we're landing on our overview tab of our workbook. We're going to go ahead and go into our AI query tab. I just have buttons across the top here that allow us to easily navigate. And what I've done is actually stage custom SQL query just as a placeholder for this, so that when we come in and we start to do this analysis work, I didn't have to create a new custom SQL query. So if I go into explore mode here, I can actually come into our placeholder query. You can see what I had previously. What I'm going to do is go ahead and just do place all. And what I've done is actually union this a couple times just so that we can get some more data for analysis. And where this becomes really powerful is actually being able to call these types of functions. So this is just one example of being able to generate data, but there's a lot of other things that can be done with this. Any number of analysis, any type of thing where you know that as a data practitioner in Databricks, you want to be able to expose Gen AI to your non-technical users to be able to use this. So now that we've run our SQL query here, we could also call this via pass-through function, which I'll highlight when we get to the AI functions tab. Now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and go to our table. So you can see we have our customer data, we have order date, sales ID, customer ID, total cost, all of this good stuff. From here, what we can actually do, based on the fact that we were able to run an LLM in Databricks, bring that data into Sigma, and for this use case, it's generated data, but you could be running this on your own data. Now we can start to do some customer analysis of this and start to understand this data deeper. So From here, let's go ahead and start to build some visualization so that we can start to understand our trends over time for this data. So I'm just going to go ahead and click our visualization here. Obviously, we have all of our sales data. You can see that our unit costs and total costs have already been converted over to dollars. If we needed to, we could just convert that here. Getting into our bar chart, typically when we start to look at this, we'd want to understand, our sales over time. If I come up here, I'm going to leave this as day. Let's look at, we'll grab our total cost. This shows our total sales over the duration of this period. And additionally, we can come in here and we can start to analyze this a little further and start to see what products are really driving our sales. And as we scroll over this, we can get an idea and kind of see that, oh, MacBooks are really driving our sales. This type of ad hoc analysis on top of an LLM is really powerful. The other piece of this too, even though we have the table above, is we can actually drill down into this to show underlying data. So this is going to give us a nice pivoted view of this so we can see what our total cost was. And we can also get an idea of all of the order dates. Selected that one order date, but if I were to unselect that here, I can then get an idea of all of our products and see what our total costs were and how much we were actually selling these for. Now that we've talked through this piece and kind of highlighted the abilities of AI query and how that can be leveraged by non-technical users in Sigma, let's get into AI functions. Getting into our AI functions tab here, as you can see, Databricks has exposed a number of AI functions that have been pre-built. Similar to what we were doing before, where we actually used AI query and DBRX to help generate data, Databricks has seen use cases to do the same types of AI workloads over and over again. These include analyzing sentiment, fixing grammar, similarity, summarize, and translate. All of these are very useful. What we're actually going to be highlighting today is the ability to translate a document from French and then summarize that document. So in order to do this, I'm actually going to go into our edit mode here. And what this is going to allow us to do is we have an input table. So I've inputted this French document here. I know no French whatsoever, and I'm not able to read this at all. From here, I'm going to add a calculation, and I'm going to pull through Databricks' AI Translate in order to translate this text. In our formula bar here, I'm going to copy over our translate query. Instead of having to watch me type this, I have it saved. So what this is doing is calling the AI translate function as a pass-through function. We have a bunch of these in Sigma. In this case, we're going to be calling text. You can also call different types of data in order to be brought in via any function that's available within Databricks. What we want to pass in is what text we're translating. And then this last part is just telling us what language to translate this into. So we're going to go ahead and translate this to English. We go ahead and hit return. And then I'm just going to update this column header. As you can see, this is a document to actually form a limited liability company. I guess they call them SARLs over there. But we can kind of read through. It's a longer document where Databricks' AI queries can actually help us out further is being able to not only translate this data for us, but also summarize. I'm just going to drag this column over a little further so we can get kind of an idea. It looks, like a very similar to like an LLC document. So we're going to go ahead and add another calculation here. And this time, instead of having it translate, I'm actually just going to have it do a quick summary. Copy and paste our text in here. And then you can see I misspelled the column. So let me just go ahead and delete that. And then when we go ahead and hit return, this is then going to look at everything in this column of data and then create an AI summarization of that. We can just call this summary. It has to read through all of the words that are in this column, and then it's creating a summary. So it's saying a limited liability SLARL is established. This is really helpful for translation use cases where you might have text that's coming in multiple languages. And the nice part about this is, say you have something that's in French, something that's in German, something that's in Spanish. All you have to do is set it to what language you want it translated to, and DBRX will actually pick that up and be able to say, oh, this is Spanish. Let me translate this to English. And then additionally from there, being able to take that one step further and actually summarize this data. These are just two of the functions. Obviously, Databricks has a lot more of these. All of these are available within Sigma, and I would invite you to try them out for your use case. The last piece I'm going to talk through today is our write back functionality. Um, I had created an LLM projection for revenue, and what I wanted to ultimately do was be able to have um, my users input this data in order to access it and then be able to interact with it and also check our LLM. If we go back to our data tab here, you can see I have a couple of different tables that are actually controlling this. In our model control, you can see we're actually using Mixed here. I have it set up as a selector, so if I wanted to, I could change this to DBRX and see what the model output would be like from that. And then we have our different metrics that we want to look at. So initially, I have it set up for revenue, but we can look at profit and profit margin. What we're doing is actually feeding some summary data into an array that we're ultimately passing into our prompt. So we have our summary data here, and the next step is actually being able to convert this to an array. If you look under the hood at our SQL, I'll make this a little bit bigger, you can see I've just copied and pasted a SQL statement in order to generate these arrays. These arrays are what are going to power our LLM when we give it information to then make estimations about profitability for the future. Profitability, profit margin, or revenue for the future. I'll go ahead and toggle this back. Once we get down to our projection piece, this is where being able to build this kind of framework for LLMs is very powerful. I kind of break this into three different prompts. The first being the instruction prompt, the next being the data prompt, and the third being results. So instructions are telling the AI what kind of task it's going to carry out. Data prompt is the data that you actually want it to use in order to make a projection. And the last part is the results prompt, which is going to be, this is how I want you to return this data. And all of these put together kind of make up our full prompt, but we break these into separate sections in order to make sure we're instructing the LLM to return data in the correct manner. Now that we've walked through kind of how we're generating this data, let's take a look at how we can actually write this back and then make use of this. So coming into our LLM projection here, you can see we have a linked input table. And what's happening within this is right now we're looking at revenue. I could look at any number of these selections within the prompt. This metric is going to be passed back into our prompt. We're going to rerun our LLM, and instead of looking at revenue, now we're looking at the output of profit and kind of what we expect the next quarter to look like. Additionally, within here, we have the ability to overwrite this. So this is where actually using Sigma input tables becomes really powerful. If we thought one of these values was off, we could click one of these checkboxes and then overwrite this value. The last piece of this that then becomes even more powerful is once we've had our business users come in and take a look at this and confirm, oh yes, this data looks correct, we can actually write this back to Databricks. If I click these three dots here, and then under advanced options, we can create a warehouse view of this. So if I create a warehouse view, this is actually going to point back to our catalog and then our schema, and then we actually get to name whatever the view is going to be. Thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate you taking the time to let us walk you through how Sigma's thinking about Databricks' LLMs and Gen AI and how you can leverage those within your platform. We really look forward to hearing about the use cases that you guys think this would apply to within your environment. Cheers.